Okay, well, I'm very excited to be recording episode 4. With you right here, right now. I'm, of course, host Isaac, and I am joined by a super super special guest.
Hey, am I introducing myself?
Yeah.
My name is Mary Jean Rubenstein. I am, among other things, largest sister to Isaac
Yep,
Rubenstein.
yep. That's the most pivotal thing, probably. Like if you
Yeah,
had like
very
it's at
large
the
sister.
top of your resume.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm super excited to be recording this little episode with you here today. Been trying to make it happen for some time now. But as I don't know if you know, but as all of the avid and diehard Yeah for Real viewers know, the guest brings the topic, and so I just want to
Yes.
know, what are we talking about today?
So, Isaac, I was thinking today we might talk about college.
Yeah,
College.
because you were
So,
like Isaac doesn't have enough of that in his life, and
exactly.
so
So why
yeah,
not bring the college?
yeah,
Why don't we talk about why people go to college, what happens at college, how
yeah.
college is run, any of that kind of stuff. And I figured this because, as your avid viewers may or may not know, you are a student at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut.
They've
Um,
just found out.
and I'm a faculty member and now administrator at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. So we have two, resonant but very different perspectives on college, on a particular college that might be interesting to talk about. So why not do that?
Absolutely.
Unless you'd rather talk about like football, which is fine too. Like I don't know, you
That
bring
is
it.
yes. Yes, we're here to talk about basketball and football, your two favorite things in the entire world.
Cool.
No, I'm super excited to talk about college. I think that not to out you here, but you've been involved in education for some time now. And I think that you have a lot to say. And I think you're also an incredibly intuitive human being and like very perceptive. And so I think you could have a very interesting lens on, students in college and that kind of thing. I did come with some questions prepared,
Cool.
but also if you had anything you wanted to don't jump out of the gate with, I'm happy to go with that. But also, I guess, like, just to, like, a little context is not context, but like, along with this preamble is sort of like it was a very interesting last semester at our school Wesleyan, but really across the country, as I'm sure everyone is aware, sort of a very like tense time to be on a college campus. I guess I'm curious to hear how. I feel like it was really mostly like second semester of this year. Like how was that from your perspective?
Wow, we're going right there, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
You're like
I
leaping in
mean,
right there. We're
I
not going
feel
to talk
like
about like the open curriculum and all
that's
of
for
the
later.
wonderful
That's for later.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. Yes, it has been a politically stressful year and an ethically stressful year,
Yeah.
right? And I think that stress did intensify considerably in the spring semester. Um, I imagine what you're referring to is the cropping up in the spring of encampments at various college campuses. We had a what turned out to be a pretty robust one at Wesleyan. I'm told, I didn't count myself, but there were a lot of tents out there. I'm told it reached about 100
Hmm.
tents right here outside my office. You can see this window right here. I was looking out over it. Um, and I think I will sort of lead with a topic sentence here. I think that this little liberal arts college uh, did as well as it could to provide a space for students to express their concerns, model democracy and care for and with one another, stir the university to do its part in responding to the crisis in Gaza, and to do all that in a relatively safe and protected way. And it could have gone otherwise. So I'm really grateful to the cosmos and everything on down from the cosmos for that things went better than they might have done. But yeah, but what do you wanna talk about with that?
I guess like I first off, I totally agree with you, and I think that what I think that like what a lot of like Americans were probably focused on was like, oh my God, like let's look what's happening at Columbia, like all these schools were just like things were just going, where things were really tense there. And I sort of agree with you that like it felt at Wesleyan that things, while still like tense in moments, like was much more open dialogue focused, like really more like supportive. So I think that that's like an interesting little tidbit that like doesn't get did that definitely didn't get shown around in the news as much of like the schools, even the schools that made deals like Brown, right, which made the deal with the student protesters, or schools more like Wesleyan, which like overall like the hostility level wasn't really that high most of the time, from what I could tell, at least. But I mean, other than the some moments here and there. But I guess what I'm curious about is like I obviously have the student body perspective of like, how it the difficulty in choosing like whether or not to sleep at the encampment, like even the sort of politics of that decision, because it wasn't the whole social theories around that. But I guess I'm curious, like in the faculty body, like how it was like navigating that, because at I guess from student perspective, like not supporting the encampment would be like a whoa, like whoa. But then also maybe supporting the encampment too much would be like, all right, like, so I guess that's sort of what I'm curious about.
Sure. Well, I'll speak first as a faculty member, and then maybe second as a person in the administration at this
Okay,
point, as
yeah.
a person temporarily in the administration. We'll say this.
Temporary if you want it to be temporary.
Temporary administrator. The I think that our my colleagues in on the faculty were for the most part, very supportive of what was going on in the encampment, but also aware that it's their obligation to teach students who come from a variety of
Yeah.
backgrounds, and that there may have been students who, for one reason or another, didn't feel comfortable or safe participating in the work that the students were doing at the encampment. For example, a number of our international students who are here on frailly positioned visas,
Yeah.
had anything, God forbid, gone wrong with the encampment, and had law enforcement been called in, their visas could have been threatened or revoked. So there are those students. There are, other students you can imagine, with differing responses to the work that was happening there. So I think that faculty were trying in very different ways, and this came across differently from different faculty members. To be accommodating to the students who were spending most of their time for the last few weeks of the semester in the encampment, to be supportive of them, to be making sure that they were hydrating and staying, well, and also to be, supportive and present to the students who were seeking a more the kind of education that they had signed up for, in a classroom, sitting down, talking about the stuff that is on the syllabus. And that can be I think that was a little difficult for many faculty to balance. But, at the end of the day, it is our job as faculty to encourage students to learn, to research, to think, to communicate, to exchange ideas, and to come up with their own views on things. So I think what all of us were trying to avoid was making it look like there was some kind of political cost of entrance to classes,
Yeah.
right? Like you can only access your education if you profess allegiance to X, Y, or Z, or if you don't profess allegiance to X, Y, or Z, or if you're and I think that that's a more difficult. That work is more difficult for our colleagues who teach classes that are directly relevant to that kind of work. Our colleagues who teach in human rights, in government, in Indigenous studies, in American studies, in these kinds of disciplines that study resistance movements and political strategies, et cetera. A little more difficult than, folks who are teaching like how to play the guitar or, how to set up a physics laser or something like that. Like these are right. So I do want to acknowledge it was a rough time for faculty.
Yeah. Sending love to all of the physics teachers out there. So I was gonna go in that same direction because I remember, well, I sort of feel like there's some, maybe among like the student body, and not everyone obviously, but there's this general sense of like you have to come down on one side or another, or like that's also just very much the direction of like how things are in the world we live in right now, and I think that like that is sort of an unfair ask of people in the power position of like teacher, of like faculty, of administrator. And I like this became super clear to me when I had a meeting with a professor of mine, and he sort of talked about like his own moral decision of like on the one hand, like do I want to be like political power professor where I like really stand up for the morals and like inspire my students, but then like alienate the like genuinely alienate the people who for one reason or another don't agree, and that like ultimately like you're like what you just said is that you have to create a space where everyone feels welcome, and so I guess what you said really resonates with me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think I should also say that different people make different decisions about these kinds of crisis points and inflection points. And I do think it's helpful to have some people who are very clear about their positions, where they are, where their commitments lie. And it's also really important to have a number of people who are making space for other people to have opinions and positions so that they can come to them, right? For their students to be able to come to them and say, I'm having a very hard time, I'm feeling excluded, or I'm feeling targeted, or I'm feeling whatever, right? Or I'm feeling fragile, or I'm feeling vulnerable, right? Whatever it is, that can sometimes be easier to do in relation to a faculty member or an administrator who has a clear position. And sometimes it's easier to do in relation to somebody who seems kind of more expansive and can kind of hold a lot of different positions. So I do think it's helpful to have different colleagues taking different strategies there. Right.
Absolutely. So I guess because everyone's talked about the college campus stuff of this year so much already, it's been beaten to death at this point. Like, is this the first time in your memory, or I guess is this the first time when you've been teaching at Wesleyan that you can sort of think of like any kind of serious example of something like this that happened?
This is certainly the most serious, most sustained political protest we have had in 18 years, which is the length of time I've been here.
Okay. Was there like any other ones that you can think of?
No, we've had
Any
rallies.
political events? Yeah.
We've had rallies, we've had protests, we've had, after particular elections, we've had people show up. We've had protests at the president's house or at the president's office over this or that policy, but there hasn't been, a weeks-long commitment to putting students' lives on hold,
Yeah.
and in the middle of the green the way that it was.
Yeah. So do you see, because of how rare it was and maybe how impactful it was to the university, do you see like any, at Wesleyan, at other schools, wherever, do you see anything like, obviously, there's only so much schools can do about specifically the war going on in Gaza, but like from a policy point, like do you see anything changing for like next year, whether it's like, students cannot stand on the green without a valid permit or whatever, or even things as simple as that, or like spaces for people to speak, that kind of thing. Like, I guess I'm just curious about like if you see any like lasting and reverberating consequences of the sort of tense year at schools.
Consequences not well here. I don't think we're going to get any, increased surveillance or
Yeah.
increased enforcement of rules or things like that. And in fact, a number of the administrators on campus received hundreds of emails from angry parents across the country. They weren't necessarily Wesleyan parents.
Okay.
Who were livid about the non-enforcement of the university's rules regarding encampments, tents, protests, desecration of property, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that if those rules weren't enforced in a punitive way in the spring, I can't imagine we would see this in the fall, especially not preemptively, right? Not
Yeah.
preemptively. I think that the most lasting change here is going to be that the student protest, the leaders of the student protest, and some very upper level administrators, I am not one of them, did actually come to a number of very hard won agreements about policy changes,
Mm-hmm.
and it took those, and I want to. Send all of my respect and thanks to them. I mean, it took them weeks of sometimes they would work all day, like into the night, trying to talk to one another to find some common ground. And they managed to come to agreements on nearly all of the students' demands. And that's pretty remarkable to me. So I do think that there will be, so that's a positive change, right?
Yeah.
That's not a change in enforcement or something. That those are positive changes with respect to university procedures and protocols and commitments and things like that. And I think that the most important thing is that this experience has allowed students to model protest, negotiation, diplomacy in a, again, comparatively safe space,
Mm-hmm.
so that some of them might be able to go on and do that work in places where it matters even more than it does here. I'm not saying it doesn't matter here. Of course it
Yeah.
matters here, but it matters even more elsewhere. Right? So that's been, I think, the most important legacy of the last few months.
Yeah, I agree. I think that like, you know, a lot of people. I think it's like I don't love the comparison here between the two things, but a lot of people talk about like the Vietnam War protests as the like sort of like model for um, older generations, and I think that it's like I think it's good for the like for the iPad generations to perhaps have their own model to look at of like what it means to organize, what it means
Yeah.
to um, protest. I think that like I guess from the kids' perspective here, like I know a lot of people feel very like stuck in what's going on in the world. Like wow, things are just happening and they are terrible and it is like an overwhelming force and the ability to change it just lessens and lessens every year. And so I think it's really healthy for people to like see a way of organizing and being like, oh, actually, maybe like I can actually affect the world around me in whatever way, you know, like the Wesleyan policy changes aren't going to fix every problem, but every step matters, right? And every little bit helps.
Yeah.
So I guess I want sort of leaning or moving away a little bit from this because it has been beaten to death. I have a few questions for you, and
Okay, I'm
and you
ready.
know we can do any of them or whatever. But I guess speaking of the iPad kid generation, how you started teaching? I would say like before technology really like skyrocketed. I would say right like you started teaching with like a chalkboard, and you still do. I know that.
I do. Yeah.
But would it be right to say that when you started teaching, there were not laptops in the classroom?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was, I mean, if I saw a laptop, I'd be like, why would that person bring a laptop into the classroom?
Okay.
It was like a strange thing to see. I mean, students had laptops,
Yeah.
but they would, for the most part, keep them at home where they would do their work on their
Okay.
laptop and take notes by paper. Yeah.
Okay. So you've taught a wide array of time periods and technology, not technology. How has it changed? Like how what are the big do you think it's good? Do you think students are smarter? Are they less in it? And you know, you do not need to go on and like toast and roast all your students here. You know, but I guess I'm just really curious because I've only been in school in like high level education with a laptop in front of me.
Okay. So, I do think students are more distracted and distractible than they used to be.
Yeah.
I also think I'm more distracted and distractible than I used to be. So this isn't any kind of accusation. I know that I have a hard time in meetings paying attention to the substance of the meeting and not trying simultaneously to be clearing my email and responding to that text from my mom and doing stuff that's like popping into my um, so I do think it is important for all of us as a community of teachers, of learners, of people who are trying to focus on something, to find ways to remind ourselves constantly to attend to what it is we're doing if we possibly can. And especially if it's important to us, right? Like if this class is important to you, try to turn off your notifications. Just like try to do it so that you're there, so that you're present. Consider if the course does not require you to have technology, consider not having technology. Consider, having a notebook, a paper notebook, and doodling in the margins if you need to stay focused. Because there are always things that we've always done to keep ourselves focused that aren't quite the substance of the thing. But doodling in the margins, which is not, paying attention to Hegel or whatever it is you're dealing with, actually increases focus and concentration, whereas responding to your mom does not. I mean, you actually can't, right? What we do when we multitask is we're toggling back and forth. We're not actually doing two things at the same time. We're toggling.
But if you don't respond to Ronnie, she's gonna start calling you, and you don't want that.
Yeah, I know, but we have to teach Ronnie that some things have to wait.
Yeah.
Some things I can't wait until you have Ronnie on. Some
I
things
can't wait.
So that having been said, so yes, I think we're all more distractible. I think it is harder, it's harder to sit down and read a book for an hour without checking your phone. You have to constantly remind yourself, this is the thing that is important to me. Therefore, I'm creating a space. Therefore, I'm turning these things off. But I think that there are ways that we can remind one another to do that and to be present in this way. For all of that, even though I do think students are less focused and faculty are less focused, they're no less intelligent and they're no less capable.
Yeah.
And in fact, I find students are they're able to make more and more connections to more and more disparate things. Because they're just exposed to so much stuff all the time. So they'll be like, oh, this is just like that. This is just like that thing. It's just like everything. And that's really exciting. And that it can be really helpful in as a way, not just of understanding the material, but of using the material to understand the situation that we're in. I've also found, and I don't know how you feel about this, but like the biggest change, the most profound change that I've seen in, not a ton, like 20 years of teaching. That's not it's not
Good
geological
God.
but it's long. Is that I found that the students are getting like kinder and more caring with one another, more empathetic and more careful with one another, not in a scared way, but just like a caring with one another.
Yeah.
Not that they've always been that way. It's just like somehow it gets more. And I'm not quite sure how to account for it, but whatever role technology has or hasn't played in that, whatever role the social emotional learning that all of you grew up with in your early childhood education has had, I am constantly stunned by the effectiveness and kindness and like straightforwardness of the way that you all communicate with one another. And I look at it and I think like we did not do that in college. Like that stuff we did not do. Did we crank out papers? Absolutely. Did we read thousands of pages? Absolutely. Did we do it right? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not. I don't think that difference is all that interesting. What's interesting to me is this social emotional maturity, and I don't think that your generation tends to get credited all that much for it. But so I don't know if you feel that, but I really experience it for what that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a comparison point. I don't know what it was like to live as a millennial. Gen X? Gen X, never mind. You're basically a millennial.
I'm hanging on to the end of Gen X.
Yeah. You're like, come on, you're basically you got like one toe in millennial.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But I've always found that like people have been pretty like emotionally available and straightforward and direct. And I think honestly like it goes with what you were saying before of like there's just so well, everybody's just much more out there than they used to be. Like, you can, like, go onto someone's Instagram and, like, know a lot about them pretty instantly. And so I think people are, like, sort of primed to be, like, more open and, like, well, this guy already knows whatever. But, I'm honestly really not sure exactly what it is. But I do think that, like, as the internet has blown up, so has, like, sharing stories and the learning of stories of, like, other people with different like experiences than you. Like I think that's the biggest thing is that you just have so much more access than you used to like other kinds of existences than yours.
Yeah.
And
people live differently than
yeah,
we do.
like extremely, and so the just like constant visualization of that probably I think has translated to being like to the understanding of like others' experiences. So I totally agree with you that I think that's awesome. And no, we don't get credit for it, but it's okay.
If nobody has told you this before, your generation invented saying thank you after class.
I cannot believe that.
Nobody ever did it before, I promise you.
Nobody?
Nah, 2020. That's when it started.
Wow, people were just so excited to go back to school.
Really? No, they did it. They started doing it in Zoom.
Really?
We'd get off a Zoom class and students would say like, thank you, and then log out. And I remember thinking like, oh God, that's really sweet. And then it transferred over into in-person classes. And it's so wonderful and kind and thoughtful. And it's totally new. It's like that didn't exist before.
That's amazing. I can't believe that didn't exist before. That feels like the most basic level of thanks.
Thank you. It's great. You get to like check in with people on the way out. It's wonderful.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So like say what you want about the iPad generation and their headphones and they're being totally sealed off from things, but for the most part, when those students are interacting in real life, they're really kind and engaged. So anyway, I love them.
When they're not stuck with their MrBeast and their Minecraft videos.
That's it. Yes.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised it's not a MrBeast themed birthday party.
Yes, for those listeners and watchers out there, I have an almost 7-year-old who's about to have a Harry Potter themed birthday, but who spends a lot of his time with MrBeast and Minecraft videos.
Yeah, well, I actually think MrBeast is a very good influence for kids. I have in some regards. Well, yeah. So honestly, the big thing is that MrBeast, with the rise of how do I say this? Let's call it the rise of polarization in politics. I think there's a lot of internet personalities who are like so like macho, so like you have to go to the gym like 8 days a week to get a girl around your arm. And like with that is the rise of like transphobia and homophobia and all that stuff. And like for example, MrBeast, I don't know how aware you are of this, but like has this like had a group of friends and like one of them came out as trans, and MrBeast like people were like, you have to take her off, trans woman, and like you have to take her off, she shouldn't, why is she here anymore, it's weird, and like full through he was like so supportive of her, and like in that way I think like that's a good model for like 7-year-old kids, because like that's always how it goes, right? Like where like something that's like weird for some generation becomes normalized for the new generation. And so I guess it's just nice to watch that in real time. Like I guess I remember like I grew up as homosexuality was like a super normal thing for me. Like that wasn't this new crazy weird thing. And so it's cool seeing that happen to like a new generation.
Yeah. But I remember that always baffled me when you would say things when you were very small, if you'll forgive me.
No, please.
Like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to be gay. I was like, wow. What a cool way for a kid to grow up. You were just like,
man,
wonder what that would be like. Oh, who knows? Like, I wonder if I'll be tall or not. I wonder if
Yeah,
I'll,
yeah. Be
you
gay.
know, I wonder if I'll be gay.
Yeah, hell yeah. You know,
Guess
look,
we'll
I
have
was
to
I was
see.
open to new experiences. That's funny. Well, so then on the flip side of the technology discussion, is there any piece of technology that you have now that you didn't have before where you're just like, holy, like my job as a teacher has become 8,000 times easier?
No, not easier. Better,
Okay.
better. I think that uh, I think that just visuals of all sorts make things better. If they're used well. So a
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint presentation, for example, I don't always use PowerPoint in class. If I do, it's to show images.
Mm-hmm.
Just an easy way to show images. I don't tend to put like lots of bullet points on slides. It's the stuff that I teach doesn't work very well that way. Like if I have to do something, I'll write it down on a Blackboard. And I can tell you why I do that instead of, but if you want to talk about like classroom technique. But when I'm giving like a talk, a public talk now, I wouldn't dream of giving a talk, just, standing up for 45 minutes and
Yeah.
delivering a talk. I always use a PowerPoint now. And I'll use it, again, to show images, to show quoted speech.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm quoting somebody, it's much easier to read a quotation as you're hearing it, rather than to just hear it. That makes my job much harder because it makes the lecture prep about 3 times as long as it usually is, and maybe even 4 because I'm just so bad at visual layout. I'm like, I can't get the damn image to go into the right. Why is it not rotating? Um, but it makes the paper come across much more clearly, and
Yeah.
it makes the audience much more engaged. So yeah, not easier, but better, I do think that the increasing integration of visual materials into teaching has made the whole process of education better. I know that if I'm in class and I show like a 5-minute video, for example, the students respond to it and say things about it. In Well, there are 2 things to say. One, their level of engagement and the intensity of their engagement is totally different from when I'm like, read this paragraph really closely and tell me what you see and the prepositions. Like that. It's just like a different mode of engagement. And second, they always invariably see and hear things that I had not seen or
Yeah.
heard in that piece of, like, it is unlikely, let me just tell you, that I'm going to have students find something in a paragraph that I've been reading for the last 25 years that I haven't seen before. But a piece of video that I know pretty well, they're always lapping me in
Yeah.
terms of what they see, like pointing out camera angle, pointing out like the kind of music that's being played, pointing out like lighting, location, who's being asked to speak, who's not being asked to speak. And that really energizes the classroom, right? When
Yeah.
students have something that they can see that they are contributing, that I didn't bring, that I wasn't prompting them for, that I'm like genuinely asking, what do you see here? So that we're all kind of teaching each other about what's going on.
That's a good point, and it's interesting because like different. Let's go back to the generation talk, but like each generation is good at a different thing, and
Mhm.
I could not handle a Blackboard like you could, but I could take down a YouTube video. Like I could do that.
Yeah. Let me tell you about what's good about a Blackboard. Let me give
Yeah,
it like a rousing
please.
defense of
No,
Blackboard.
please.
Because one of the things that I've done in my time here is that I have served on the committee that tenures people
Okay.
and grants them promotion to full professor. So there are 3 ranks of tenure track professors. You come in as an assistant, and then you get tenured to associate, and then you get promoted to full professor. I've been on this committee, and so I've read tons of teaching evaluations, thousands of teaching
Mm-hmm.
evaluations. These things that students write at the end of the semester to say, this went well, this didn't go well, please change this, please tenure this person, please deify this person, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one thing that I was really struck by was the number of students who will say, damn it, I loved this faculty member's use of the chalkboard. Like they would call out use of chalkboard. And then there were other students who would get very frustrated with PowerPoints, with how crowded the slides
Yeah.
were, or how they were available or weren't available. Here's my thinking. Sometimes you absolutely like, let's just start with the, the truth universally acknowledged that sometimes you need a PowerPoint. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just have to show stuff, right? But if you are trying to um, communicate ideas that take a little time to process, PowerPoint is a terrible way to get those ideas written out. And the reason is that they just appear. It pops up and it's right there and it's process right, it's there. If you are writing on a blackboard, you are doing it in real time. You are saying the thing, and you can't write faster than you can write, right? So people are actually processing at the speed at which you can write. They can see the idea unfolding before them because they're seeing the writing
Mm-hmm.
happening
Mm-hmm.
in front of them. If I were trying to teach math, which God
God help
knows
you.
I can't teach, right? God help me if I were to try to teach math. Can you imagine like just a difficult differential equation just being popped up on a PowerPoint? Like it would be terrible. You have to see how the faculty member is writing out those variables, those exponents, those whatever, and like what comes first and what comes next and how you get there in order to process it. So even though I think PowerPoint is wonderful, I do think that there can be an overuse of it. And for what it's worth, contemporary students, very young humans, will be like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, great use of the damn chalkboard. Yeah.
Okay, I have always been sold on the
Yeah.
chalkboard argument, and I agree with you. And as someone who's watched your classes, I think, you know how to engage with a chalkboard.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're writing on the chalkboard, you're in a different place in the class, right?
Yeah.
I've just learned about this, like if for kid raising, and it's a thing that I've known in the classroom, but it's not a thing that I've known for a kid, for child raising. If you're like stuck in a thing with your child where you're saying one thing and the kid is saying no, and you're saying yes, and the kid is saying no, one very helpful thing to do is just move. You just go somewhere else. You just like go to a different place in the room. You just like you change the perspective, you change the whatever. Writing on the chalkboard allows you to do that.
Yeah.
You're not just standing in one place. You're like running to this place. You're erasing. You're like, oh God, I wrote the wrong thing. Right. All of that stuff that seems like it's actually distracting is actually part of the embodiment of the thing that you're trying to teach. So it's really helpful to like get up and be in a particular place. Right? Even and also you can like have students do it, right? Have everybody draw something on a board and talk us through it.
It's engaging. Like
Yeah.
it's just a way to engage with your students. That's
Yeah.
This was one thing I couldn't stand when I was in high school during the peak COVID stuff. My
Mm.
math classes would have these like shared drawing boards, like
Oh.
on like everyone's computer. You'd all be on like a shared like Google drawing board, and it's just like everyone's just drawing like a different triangle. It's just like the worst thing in the world. But it doesn't feel like you're drawing with anyone. Like it just feels like there's all these like magical little lines floating about, and it's like, so I'm totally with you. Um, okay, in our final moments, I want to
Yes.
ask you a couple of fun questions.
Okay.
First question: if you could institute one policy change across all college campuses in America right now, what would it be?
You're not gonna like it.
I'm here to
You're not
listen.
gonna like it.
Okay.
I'm telling you, you're not. Okay.
Okay.
You can have one major. That's it.
Ooh. No, I don't. If no one else is double majoring, then I don't have to.
No double, no triple, no certificates, no minors, nothing. Just one major.
Yeah. Can you explain?
Yeah, sure. Um, the more certifications and specializations that students aim to accrue, the less inclined they are, the less able they are to explore everything else there is at the university, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to fulfill the requirements of three different things and your pre-med, for example. So you never get to take that taiko drumming class.
Yeah.
You never get to take that calligraphy painting class. You never get to take that intro to Arabic class, whatever it is, ASL. The university, I mean, you hear it in the word university, is supposed to be a microcosm of the universe. It is supposed to be able to present everything to you.
Yeah.
And so students who come through them are particularly the kind of liberal arts schools that of which Wesleyan is one. Students are supposed to be exposed to all sorts of things so that they can use all of that to inform whatever it is they go on doing. And if we are encouraging them too quickly to narrow down into a single path, right? Then their life in that single path becomes that much less interesting.
Yeah.
And even though I know it sounds like I'm saying you can only have one major, it sounds like I'm saying you can have a single path. But if you only have one major, that leaves open like 22 other classes for you to take in whatever you want, whatever you want. You don't have to jump through all those hoops, right, to accrue all of those certifications. So that would be my, be my
Your policy
university
point.
wide and then
I was
policy.
expecting like no more laptops in class or something like that.
No, 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 no. Some students, work better on laptops.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really helpful to have a student with a laptop who's like, I don't know, I just looked on Wikipedia and I saw that, blah, blah, blah. Like you can have fun with them. You can
Mm-hmm.
use it, whatever. And people are going to be distracted no matter what. Laptops or not
Yeah.
laptops, people are going to get distracted. So yeah, I wouldn't stay there. I think, look, if you want students to be focused in your class, be interesting. That's the most important thing. Try that first and then outlaw laptops later.
Okay. I completely am with you. I'll put the iPad away. I'll put the computer away if my professor is, earns
Yeah, if it's
it.
worth listening to, right? If it's worth
Yeah.
listening to, then yeah.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Can you tell the difference between a kid who genuinely needs an extension and a kid who just stayed up too late partying last night and is really floundering last minute?
Uh, usually,
Yeah.
usually. But it is not one of my priorities to distinguish between those students, to
Yeah.
make that distinction. Yeah, I can usually tell. But part of the work of the university is to provide a space in which students can figure out where to put their energies, where to put their attentions, and what's important to them. And that's going to mean that sometimes they're going to go too far into some direction that they maybe wish they hadn't pursued. So I don't think it's up to me to distinguish between who genuinely needs an extension and who genuinely and who not genuinely needs an extension, right? And it's also been my experience that like a little compassion goes a long way.
Yeah.
And there are times at which you have to put your foot down eventually, but it is never my first inclination to put my foot down, and it's certainly not up to me to determine, whether or not your reasons are valid for needing an extension.
That's my professor. I it's my kind of way.
Yeah.
Well, I really really appreciate you coming on the pod, coming on the Yeah for Real pod. Do you feel like you had a yeah for real moment during our during our recording? No, I don't have to answer that. This was so much fun. I would really love to have you back another time if you want to talk about anything else. Just to glaze you a little bit here. You are a master of many things. Just pretty recently released Astrotopia, which is a book decoding religion in space colonization, talking about Musk, Bezos, all those things. It's out on Amazon and in your local bookstore. And you truly are a smart cookie. So I would really love to have you back at some point.
Thanks, Isaac. I would always love to come back, and it's really wonderful to be part of this project of yours. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, this is high level. This is a high level project that we got going on here.
Absolutely.